some significant comments coming from the Chinese state. So last week we were bringing you some of the indications. Maybe they were uncomfortable with what was going on with Russia. Maybe they weren't going to really back Russia up, that they were kind of, considering pressuring Russia to come to the table and end this thing, which would be the best possible situation. And they are the country that has the most power, the most sway, ultimately, in being able to force some sort of concessions on the Russian state. Well, now, not so much. Let's go ahead and put this Axios tear sheet up on the screen. So the day after Biden and Xi spoke, you had China's vice foreign minister just completely taking Russia's side, blaming NATO directly for the war in Ukraine, among other comments. I'm going to read you a number of his comments here because this was quite significant. He called NATO a Cold War vestige, warning that its expansion could cause repercussions too dreadful to contemplate. He said sanctions against Russia are now going to such lengths that globalization is used as a weapon. Even people from the sports, cultural, art, and entertainment communities are not spared. Let's go ahead and put the next piece up on the screen. This is from Reuters. He also said that the sanctions against Russia are getting more and more outrageous, adding that Russian citizens were being deprived of overseas assets for no reason. Some more of his comments. History has proven time and again that sanctions cannot solve problems. Sanctions will only harm ordinary people, impact the economic and financial system, and worsen the global economy. The pursuit of absolute security by NATO precisely leads to absolute non-security. The consequences of forcing a major power, especially a nuclear power, into a corner are even more unimaginable. So, listen, I actually agree with some of that analysis about sanctions. I do think that they are extraordinary, what we're doing. I do think they will be brutal on the Russian people. I do think that the, freak out over sports and cultural figures is insane. But if you're only talking about NATO and you're not talking about the fact that it was Russia that just invaded, then clearly you have a very selective view of what is going on here, which is why these comments would seem to indicate that any hopes that the Chinese government might step in to help bring this conflict to a close, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, let's put this New York Times tear sheet up on the screen, which actually echoes a lot of what Matt Stoller did for us over the weekend on the coming food crisis, which is that China is facing its worst wheat crop in decades after severe flooding and is planning to buy more of the world's dwindling supply. Kiev and Ukraine are known as the breadbasket of the former Russian Empire, and they are going to need to buy a lot of Russian wheat, which is one of the world's largest wheat producers. So that's another reason why the Chinese are going to have it difficult in order to take sides. But really what it is I think the Chinese are maybe trying to get ahead of a narrative here in the West that maybe they were abandoning the Russians. And I think they are just trying to play all sides, because we've seen reports that they denied at least kind of the weapons request from the Russians, but then they're blaming NATO. So what they tell us is very different than what they tell them. In terms of what they're telling us, though, is a very clear message of being absolutely politically neutral, even if it makes them look like a clown. And that's what we saw whenever it came to the recent Chinese ambassador's appearance on the Sunday shows when he was pressed on the Russian invasion. Let's take a listen.
And we are in the opinion. Russia amassed more than 150,000 troops at China's border?
Well, that's why we want
just to be clear,
to have a
China,
friendly, good neighborly relations with Russia.
But you would recognize it's not good, friendly, neighborly relations to put 150,000 troops on the border of a neighboring country and then to send those troops into that country.
Well,
in those circumstances, why can't you condemn this as an invasion?
Well, don't be naive. Condemnation.
It sounds naive to say that's not an invasion. It
doesn't solve the problem.
100,000
I would be surprised if Russia will back down by condemnation. What is urgently needed?
Will they back down if your president asks Vladimir Putin to back down? Will your president ask Vladimir Putin to back down?
We have done so.
They rely
and
on
we'll continue to promote peace talks and urge immediate fire. And condemnation only doesn't help. We need wisdom. We need wisdom. We need courage. And we need good diplomacy.
Well, Vladimir Volodymyr Zelensky says he would like to meet with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Zelensky's in a bunker. Vladimir Putin is at a political pro-war rally right now. You can't have diplomacy when it is one country, the only one country willing to actually negotiate.
China has good relations with Russia, has good relations with Ukraine, and China keeps close communications with the United States and with Europe. They enable China to reach to all parties' concerns in the crisis. So China's unique role, can help the peaceful settlement of the crisis.
Bit cringe to watch that entire thing, but I did think it was important for you guys to hear all of it, because you're seeing he's trying to toe the line very clearly. He's like, well, and he's not wrong. He's like, well, condemnation isn't going to solve the problem. So, but also we're not going to condemn it. And then she's like, well, will your president ask him to stop? He's like, well, we have done so with peace talks. Well, they haven't exactly been present at any of the major peace talks, and from what we can see, they haven't pushed them towards the negotiating table. So they are doing everything in their power to stay out of it, which is a choice in order to side with the Russians. And they are in a strategic bind because they have an alliance, but in terms of how they're being perceived on the world stage, their image, even post-COVID was terrible, and now being aligned here is even worse. And now we even have the U.S. saying that they could face significant consequences. I'll talk a bit about this in my monologue, but they could even face sanctions from the West for continuing to buy Russian oil, or in other escalatory maneuvers, which could keep them out of certain types of trading organizations and others. All of that is on the table. So they're in a tough bind, Krystal. I think that, at least from what we can see right now, they're sticking with Russia.
If we sanction China, that would be
huge.
Extraordinary. I mean, that would really be a major, major geopolitical realignment. And we have put C4 up on the screen here. The reporting out of Biden's meeting with Xi was that he did warn China of, quote, consequences if they aid Russia in Ukraine war. So that would require going further than just their sort of like studious neutrality, which really does put a finger on the, on the scale on the side of Russia, versus actually providing some type of direct military aid, I think is what he's talking about here. He said he warned him of implications and consequences if Beijing designs to give material aid to Russia to support its war in Ukraine. He made the case China would pay a similarly heavy price if they backed Putin of Russia in the fight, similarly heavy as to the price paid directly by Russia, less than 2 months after, of course, Putin and Xi had declared a limitless partnership in facing off against the U.S. and the West. Xi reportedly told Biden, I think this phrasing is very interesting, quote, "Let he who tied the bell on the tiger take it off." Basically, again, saying like, you all created this mess with your NATO expansion and all, sort of like thumbing your nose at Russia. So now this is your problem. We're not doing anything to solve your problem for you. Of course, they could be instrumental in pressuring Russia to come to the table and ultimately, negotiate in good faith for peace. But all indications today are that they're not interested in doing that.
I don't think they're interested in any of that. So look, it's going to be interesting in terms of how this is shaking out. But in terms of the A block, where we told you guys about how the Kremlin is kind of pissing all over the idea of a peace deal, and now these Chinese comments, we could be entering, a little bit more of a strident Russian campaign, which is not, unfortunately, a good news whenever it comes to peace.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Certainly the case.
Hey guys, we're going to be totally upfront with you. This is the most perilous time that we have ever operated in.
It is so difficult just to try to sort through the news, but even more importantly, to bring you accurate information as this wave of lockdown and censorship spreads across the nation.
Yeah, look, if you can become a premium subscriber today at breakingpoints.com, you're going to help us build out a vibrant, independent media ecosystem, which is free of mainstream pressure. We can't tell you how important that is at a time like this.
Yep, that's right. Go to breakingpoints.com to subscribe. We love you guys, and we appreciate you so much.